Some interesting readings today, and as you probably remember, I tend to think of what the good news is, what our reassurance is, and what our challenge is. And there in that first reading is such a beautiful reading. As a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you. You shall be comforted in Jerusalem. You shall see, and your heart shall rejoice. So on. Such wonderful good news. We are children of God, each one of us, deeply loved as children of God. But I want actually to talk a little bit about dilemmas, which is why I wanted to change the gospel. We shall look at the second reading a bit as well, about dilemmas. What's a dilemma? Generally speaking, it's a sort of opportunity, time when you have choices. And quite often that choice, you either go this way or that way, and it's difficult to know which one to choose, which one is the most life-giving choice. And you know, sometimes we're faced with these times when we don't know what the answer is. In that second reading, there was quite a little bit about circumcision. Now, I'm sure you all know that circumcision was very much the habit, the way that Jewish faith indicated, particularly males, were Jews, that they had their foreskins snipped, and that was quite important for them, and it was very much part of the law. In fact, I think it was much more to do with health originally, that it was, it was about keeping clean in those days in the sort of desert. So there was obviously a good reason behind it. It became a very important thing. And then in this reading in the Galatians, it's saying, well, circumcision isn't the be-all and end-all. So, you could be circumcised or you can't be circumcised. But the choice, taking that choice, people who might decide to think about not having their boy child, circumcised, could get into a degree of trouble. So do you choose that if it's what you really believe in, or do you go along with the authorities? Then, of course, that reading that Trevor just read from the Gospels about the Sabbath and about being healed on the Sabbath. What is the most life-giving thing to do? Obviously, it's to heal. But it takes an awful lot of courage to do that, because you are not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. So there Jesus was faced with a dilemma. Do I go along with the law, keep in with people, or do I do the life-giving thing? And of course he did the life-giving thing, and he healed that person. What a brave, courageous thing to do. So those are the sorts of ideas that I have about dilemmas. But then there's others as well. We're all of us faced with dilemmas all the way through our lives. As you know, I've said this before, but I do these lifts for people to the hospital, for hospice, for treatment. And I was talking with this guy, the one I mentioned before, a 90-year-old, and we got talking about the atom bomb. And, if you think about the end of the Second World War, was it the right thing to do to drop an atom bomb on Japan? Or was it the right thing to do to leave things and just hope that they all, in the end, petered out? Which would be the most life-giving thing to do? Of course, at that time, there wasn't anyone else who had atom bombs, so there wasn't going to be any sort of that sort of retaliation. But, it's a big question. And of course, you don't know the answer as to which choice would have led to the least loss of life. Who's to say? And that's quite often quite difficult to actually decide. Then there was another person who I took this last week, who is from Tyne, and she had to go. I just felt for her so much. She was having chemo and radiotherapy and all sorts of things. She had 2 teenage children. She was still trying to keep a job. Yikes! She was amazing. But she was talking about how she was worried about her mum back in Thailand and was sending her some money. But she also had a brother in Thailand, sending him £100 a month. But the problem was that her brother, didn't really seem to get off his backside really, never got round to having a job. And I know the dilemma for her was, do I keep sending the £100? Or should I actually stop the £100 in a sense, or force her into doing something? Into working. One more particular one that I know that I was talking about to somebody just as last week. Somebody who's got a stoma, like I have a stoma. I don't know if you know what a stoma is, but it's a way of sorting things out when you have this thing bang on your stomach. And but this person, that means that you're left with what's called a stump between the stoma and where you normally go to the loo with. And he had diversion colitis, which is a horrible thing because you get all sorts of discharge and blood and all sorts of things, which you deal with. He was having to deal with it 3 or 4 times a day. And it was just causing him so much trouble, so he went to see the surgeon. And he said, well, we need to check obviously that there isn't anything suspicious there, but if there isn't, there's a choice. Either you have to live with it, and that it affects quality of life a bit, or you could have the operation, a reversal operation, which basically joins everything back up again. But the reversal operation will have an awful lot of risk to it. 20% chance of it going wrong. I think even more than that. So another dilemma. What do you do? What in that situation is the most life-giving thing for that person? And then of course, you only have to look around in the sort of political scene or the international scene and all the sorts of dilemmas about whether you do or whether you don't. And we only have to look around the world at the minute to see all the things that are going on and the sorts of choices that have got to be made. Life is full of dilemmas, and sometimes it takes quite a lot of courage to actually choose the right one. But that takes me to a dilemma that I was myself faced with the other day, and you may, after this, hate me for what I'm going to say. So I'm a bit anxious about saying it, so we shall see where we go. But it was a real dilemma for me. Trevor phoned me and he said, we can't find anybody to come and take this service this morning. How would you feel about coming to take the service? And he was talking about the possibility of him having to be in hospital today for the investigation, not just for the pancreatic stuff, but also, of course, as you know, his stuff with his hernia. And so there would possibly be no Trevor, there would be possibly no priest. Would you come along and take this service? Now, I have actually got to be a Billy Miller level, which wasn't really the point about it all, but what was the most life-giving thing to do? What was the right thing to do? Should I come here? Now, the difficulty about that is that the church at the minute is having to a degree rely on retired clergy to keep things on the road, and which we're very pleased to do. I'm so happy to be here, don't get me wrong. I'm not thinking to myself, oh gosh, I wish I wasn't here. I'm very pleased to be here, but it isn't a good place to be if the church is relying too much on, there's so many retired clergy who love to do it, but it's going to get worse. The situation that you faced, which Trevor faced, which Linda faced, is going to get worse because there will be fewer clergy. And yet the thing about the question is, how do you continue to be church in a really uplifting and wonderful way? Anyway, so I had this, and either it was a question of, coming, here I am, or it was a question of letting you get on with it, and with the possibility of Trevor not being here. What's best for you? And yes, what was the right thing for me? Anyway, in the end, I decided to come, that's why I'm here. So I'm here. And first of all, I decided to come. 3 reasons, I think it is. I didn't want you to stop inviting me. You might not invite me after this. I like coming. And I certainly didn't want to let Trevor down. So I came here. But the second reason that I want to come is that I want to tell you something. I want to tell you, which I've already said, about you being massively loved, children of God. Each one of you is a child of God who is surrounded with His love. You are very special. But I also want to tell you, you are amazing. I mean that. You know that I've had a lot to do with St. Martin's over the years. And this is a very special group of people. You have such creativity. Between you might think you haven't, but you have such wisdom. You have such knowledge. Put all the knowledge that you've got together. You've got such ability to create. If Trevor isn't here, you've got enough ability, and you've probably done it before, to create your own act of worship, which may well be much more meaningful than anything that I can do. You are amazing, and you can do it. But where does that lead to? I think, as I said, in the future, it's not going to be easy always to find a priest to take a service. Who's to say? You may, get a priest. We don't know. I mean, I was going to say in the hands of the gods. I'm not sure. It's probably in the hands of the bishop. But you may get a priest, but you may not. But the first thing I want to say is, don't rely too much on Trevor. Trevor, has got to face. We don't know what the story is. And of course, we all need to and will be already praying for him as we're praying for other people. But don't rely too much on him. And don't rely too much on the idea of getting a priest. How can St. Martin's, which is so special, remain sustainable way into the future so that it's going to be actually, it's going to keep going in a way that is wonderful? And that is up to you. You don't necessarily need a priest. Now, I'd be very happy to come once or twice a month even, just to take a communion service. But other times you have amongst you the ability to actually lead worship yourself. So, I didn't know whether to say this. Actually, it was a sort of dilemma itself, not just a dilemma of whether to come or not. Also the dilemma of whether to say this or not, and risk being pushed out the door. But it is an important thing to think about. And what I finally want to say is, A, don't hate me for it, but B, if you want to explore, then I would be happy to help you do that. Amen.
Amen.